Hello, everyone, and welcome to Centre Never Apart. We're so excited to have you, Mark Pariselli, and we had a lovely screening of your films. The first time I actually met you, you were drenched in blood, dressed as Carrie, like your film. Why do you think that there's so many, not just gays, but a lot of gays are so drawn to her character? Why do you think that is?
Well, yeah, so we just, happened to meet on, that's my regular Friday night.
I was like, oh, I love his look.
I guess I can speak for why I'm so drawn to Carrie. She's just such an enduring figure of, I guess we can all enjoy the revenge that she gets on her taunters and bullies, and being an outsider, being maybe taunted or bullied in this sort of the same way we can all kind of have fantasized about getting revenge. Right. Maybe not, blowing up the school, but to a certain extent. I think, I guess I've always kind of been drawn to her. That's just kind of a tragic ending, I guess. Doesn't really end that well for her.
Have you always been a horror nut?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. From a super young age, I would go into my parents' bookshelves and read Stephen King way before I should have probably.
Right.
And then made my parents rent the films on my behalf and watch them way before I should have. So I think that's kind of been a huge influence on my work and me as a person.
Okay. Well, I loved seeing that your family was very involved in the films as well, acting, and how did you make them do that?
I guess I'm lucky that I have some really supportive family members. If you noticed, it's kind of a fun thing in my films is that I make my mom be in them, in the dumpster, in Monster Mash, driving the van that kills the character.
She's the killer.
After. And then playing the mom in Frozen Roads, and I make her wear the same horrible sweater that
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, that was found in like a thrift store, and she hates it, but I really enjoy making her do that. And she studied acting, and she sort of does a bit of acting on the side as well, so she does enjoy it. It's not complete torture.
Right. Okay, well, Freddie or Jason?
I think I would choose Freddie. I think he's a much more interesting, dynamic character, and he definitely has a better outfit. I like
his look is good. I mean, everyone knows it's the man with the dirty hat, the burned face, and the red and green sweater. All right, Pinhead or Michael Myers?
I think I'd have to go with Pinhead too. I love the look, the outfit's good, and the lines. Obviously, the lines are the one-liners.
Yeah,
pretty
so
awesome.
good. And Clive Barker.
Yes,
we love Clive Barker.
Yes.
Hollywood in recent years keeps regurgitating the horror classics, not really in a good way. What is your stance on that? How do you feel?
I think that, I guess it's from, a business standpoint, they think it's pretty safe to bank on a name that's already made money. But the remakes are just so weak and almost pointless. They sort of scrub away all the grit and grime and edginess that makes the originals so interesting and really dilutes all of that. So I wish that studios would or people with money would put some of that towards new voices and people that could bring something new to the horror genre. I think we've seen enough of the tired, rehashing.
Is there any of the films that you think are good?
I guess I didn't hate the remake of The Hills Have Eyes. I thought that there were some interesting things that was done in that film and kind of blaming America in general for things, which I thought was interesting.
It's true. When did you start making films, and what motivated you? Obviously, you're influenced by horror, but what was the...
So I went to film school. I studied film at York, and I guess I was always drawn to storytelling first and foremost. I was always an avid reader and always was writing. In high school, I really got into photography and then realized that filmmaking kind of combined both of those, and it was a way of getting my voice and vision out there. So I was drawn to that for film school.
Who are some of your favorite directors, horror and non-horror?
I guess I don't have Twitter, but apparently something that was trending on Twitter was like picking your top 7 films to define you, and I was really struggling with what I would choose for that.
Okay.
But I think I'm kind of, some big names for me are Greg Araki's work has been really influential. David Lynch, But then I also love the sort of wordless visual storytelling in films of Antonioni and Bergman. And I think Lynn Ramsey's a really strong, like, recent filmmaker that I really love and admire.
What sort of other non-horror genre films have moved you, like, to create and just that you worship?
I think in high school, when I was sort of pretty young, I watched Gummo when it first came out, and that kind of just blew me away. And I guess some of Harmony Korine's work I find pretty awesome and influential.
We were talking earlier about how hard it is for Canadian fashion designers to make it. What are the struggles being a Canadian filmmaker?
I think we are lucky as Canadians to have access to Arts Council funding via the various arts councils, but I mean, it's competitive and there's only so much money that can go around. So I think the first and largest struggle for any filmmaker is probably resources and access to funding. If you don't have connections in the industry or you're not personally wealthy, I think it's hard to make a film. It's
kind of in any art form,
yes.
It seems, but
yeah.
I think with film especially because it's an expensive endeavor, right?
True. And though people are picking up their iPhones and other things and making...
Do it yourself.
Making work that way, I still think that it's a challenge financially to make your work. So that's probably the biggest and hardest thing for Canadians or filmmakers in general.
Right. Especially Canadians.
Yes, and Canadians, especially Canadians.
How does the gay play into it all?
I think in some ways it actually helps because having sort of an already niche kind of audience sort of built into your work, there are, queer festivals, there are...
like Imagination?
Yes. And there is funding for queer art and queer filmmaking specifically, right. Put forth by some of these festivals. So in that way it helps. But you are, again, you're working against the mainstream, so you sort of have to carve your own little spot.
What was the first film you made?
The first film I made in film school, I think it was, I did it all, wrote, shot, directed, edited, the whole thing. And it was shot on 8mm, still making film, black and white, and there was no dialogue, starring my brother and my mom. She didn't wear the sweater though. She was a dying woman visited by an angel that was played by my brother, and then he kind of walked her out of her sick room into the afterlife. And we shot in the middle of winter, and he was only wearing a kind of weird white gown, but then the rest of his face and arms and exposed skin was painted silver, so he really hated me for that.
How old were you guys when you made that?
I guess it was my first year of film school, so I don't know how old I would have been for that. 1920? I don't know how.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who are some of the Canadian people you look toward as far as influences and inspiration as far as filmmaking?
I love Cronenberg's early work. I wish he'd go back to making stuff like that. I guess John Grayson was an influence for me as well.
And a friend, I think, too.
Yeah, friend and kind of mentorish in my last year of film school. He was sort of overseeing after and helped me through that. So he was a big help. And who else? Those are two big Canadians.
Those are good ones. How was it to make Necromantic? And were you inspired by the story of, oh my God, what's her name? I'm having a blank. From, there's a movie on her. Oh my God, I can't believe I brought this up and I can't remember. Karen Carpenter's story.
Oh yes, for sure. So that film, Todd Haynes' film, definitely inspired that. It was kind of that meets a film called Necromantic. It's a German horror film about necrophilia. So I wanted to tell a necrophilia love story with dolls, and the maggots were really fun to work with. Yeah. They are super easy to work with. I highly recommend working with them. And Ken...
Well, because he can be difficult, I've heard.
Was a diva for sure. Yeah, just getting him to stand up straight and just stand there.
Pull it together, Ken.
Was difficult. But it was a fun project with just making the scene, the sets in my garage, and it was just fun creating kind of a Tim Burton-esque world. Yeah. Obviously, I wish I could create that in reality, but that requires a lot of money. So
Right, right,
working
right.
with dolls and stuff was fun.
Warhol obviously influenced some of your film work. Tell us about Kiss and how he influenced you in general.
Sure. So I guess Kiss and Necromantic are more of almost an experimental, an homage pieces than the narrative films. But I have a few other experimental pieces as well. So I kind of like working in both narrative or fiction filmmaking and experimental. And at the time of making Kiss, it was a number of years ago. There was in the news. It was really getting out there how much people, LGBT people around the world, suffer persecution and punishment for just being themselves. Yeah. And I loved Warhol's work and always wanted to make something inspired by him or an homage to him. So I thought it would be a great idea to transform his film Kiss, which protested the amount of, or the length of screen time people were allowed to kiss back then, and transform that into a protest to, for people from different countries where they would be punished for just being themselves. And I mean, he, as questionable as, as some of his things and life is, I think I just admire how he made his life his artwork. And he's someone who, there was, Rocky Horror was playing earlier on the screen, and that line of "Don't dream it, be it," he really embodied that. And I just admire anyone who can just go out there and be themselves and do that. And live it, yeah.
Well, I love seeing Troy and Alfarouk in the film as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I've known them forever, so that was kind of cool. Frozen Roads, is it somewhat autobiographical, like you growing up part-time in rural Canada? Yeah, so
I've grown up and lived in Toronto, but my family has a cottage in rural Ontario, and that's where we shot the film. And
cold.
Yes, it was a cold, long, cold shoot.
Winter.
Yeah. In the scene where the family is having dinner, that cottage or that house had no heat, and it was so cold that as the characters were speaking, you could see their breath. Right. So I had them sucking on ice cubes to eliminate that while they're freezing. So that was really fun. Yeah.
You're cruel.
Yeah, they didn't love me for that. But it's not autobiographical. I mean, I didn't experience some of that growing up in a small town, but I guess I kind of, driving through it, going to my cottage, I always wondered
how do these people live?
What it would be like to be queer in such a small town, and how hard it must be.
Right. What inspired After?
So After is inspired by the poem After School Street Football 8th Grade by Dennis Cooper, who I think is a huge influence on me, and I probably was reading his work way too early as well. But I always was...
How did you get into him? How did you find...
Through Greg Araki's work.
Okay.
I think in Totally Fucked Up, one of the characters talks about wanting to be a writer like Dennis Cooper, and that had led me to...
You're like, must research.
Yeah.
Was the internet around then? The internet?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess, I've always been a fan of his work and wanted to... he's such a beautiful writer, even though the work is so dark, and I wanted to create something connected in some way to what he does.
Who would be your dream actor to work with?
Oh, that's a
or two.
Tough one.
They don't have to still exist either.
Oh, okay. Well, that opens it up, I guess. It's kind of sad because I feel like every actor that I would like to work with kind of ends up abandoning their independent kind of work and going into these big budget mainstream films, and I just wish that they would keep doing like challenging work. Like I thought Ezra Miller was a really interesting actor, and I was really hoping that he would keep pursuing work. And now I think he's gonna be in a big budget like action Marvel kind of like superhero movie, and this disappoints me because I wish these actors would keep doing more challenging or difficult work.
I guess they want to get paid.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
You've been to Montreal showing your work before. Tell us about that and why you're here.
Yes, I've been lucky to have shown my work at Imagination and been supported there. So that's been wonderful. And I was here to show Frozen Roads, I believe, was when I was able to come, and it's a great festival. So I was happy and honored to be here for that.
Where else have you traveled with your work, or where else has your work traveled, and what have been sort of the highlights of your films traveling the globe?
I guess After has been my most successful piece. It's screened at maybe over 40 festivals spanning like 19 or 20 countries, and won some awards. And I got to travel Europe after school with it, which was great. And then Monster Mash has been pretty successful recently. It's screened at about 20 festivals. And it's interesting, though, because I made that film a few years ago, and it sort of struggled to find a home at festivals. Maybe queer festivals thought there wasn't going to be an audience for a horror film, and horror festivals thought it was too queer, so they sort of didn't find a place. And recently, even especially this past year, it's kind of got a lot more traction in screenings. And I think now queer festivals have horror short programs, which I think is really interesting. Right. So it's kind of finding a home much later than I thought it would.
What are you currently working on?
So I've just written a few feature-length scripts, but there's one that I'm really going to try to push forward with, and I've submitted some applications for Grants Council funding. So I'm hoping that that could be my next project. It's sort of super small, 2 characters in one location, and kind of a breakdown of a relationship, and things get dark and kind of grotesque pretty quickly.
Okay, cool. Do you think you'll stick with the horror genre, or do you think...
I think Monster Mash is definitely my most, like my queer homage to horror. Right. I think, though, I would always incorporate elements of it. I think that there's so much that can be mined and undermined, and so many references that can be used in horror cinema. So I think I'll always want to keep working within it in a way.
Do you think ever television or music videos or anything like that? Is there other aspirations of...
I'd love to do more music videos. I actually directed a music video for Lightfires, the Toronto-based band.
And which video was that?
Call It Like That. It's the Warhol, black and white Warhol kind of inspired video. I'd love to do that more as well. So I think it's such a great medium, and growing up in when Much Music used to play music videos all the time. It was a really great...
It's an era gone by.
Inspiring time. So I wish I could work in that medium as well.
What advice would you give to young girls, guys who want to create film?
I think you don't have to necessarily go to film school, but I think it's so important to create your own film school. Watch things that you aren't necessarily going to be drawn to. Do your research and look for things that, from all over the world, from a different range of kinds of films. If you're going to try to be a screenwriter, write your own things, I think it's really important to read scripts, read screenplays, and to just really work on developing your own voice. I think people want to try to rush towards making feature-length films, and I think you want to... Yeah, you want to
step by step.
I think take your time, and it's scary being on set. It's hard being on set. It's not easy to get what you are trying to get on screen. So I think some practice, whether that's in film school or on your own, is really important.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted to say thank you so much to you and for everyone that's been helping at Never Parties. It's great to be here. And thank you to the audience for coming out and supporting the work.
Yeah. Is there any questions from anyone in the audience? Not that I can see you, but yes. Yeah, of course.
So I'm a little absent-minded, and I didn't actually read the description of the event tonight before I came, and didn't realize until you sat down right now that all five films were by the same person. So I kind of took them in as like a series of films by different people, and found myself being like, oh, this guy's kind of got it. This guy needs a little bit of work. I see some potential here. You know what I mean?
And so speaks to the different eras.
Well, absolutely, right? But even some of the lo-fi stuff, I was like, oh, there's potential here, kind of thing. But I was wondering if you could put yourself in my shoes. How do you feel about the relative merits of the different filmmakers you saw tonight?
Yeah, it's interesting watching the pieces back to back like this. Some of them I haven't seen in quite a long time, and there's definitely things that I'd like to improve, and wish I could go back and
don't be like George Lucas
and do again.
Don't do it.
There won't be director's cuts of these. Don't worry. But there are things that I can still find that I'm proud of, and some of the images and the yeah, there's things that I definitely want to stand, like I wish I could correct or do in a different way, but there are things that I really stand by still. So sometimes it's a little awkward watching them, but then I think there are redeeming qualities in all of them.
Cool. Is there any other questions? Catherine? I told you I would.
First of all, I'm from Manhattan, which is work with me, so wonderfully praising during the talk. My question was going to be about after so thank you for that. But I still will ask, it's one of my favorite things, and I'm curious about, you spoke to how you were drawn to his writing, but I guess as a follow-up to that, have you been in contact with him, and have you seen the film and all that? Because it really is, what one film really does bring that story.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm glad that, I really am so happy to hear that, especially someone that knows his work. When I was going to make it, I did reach out and contact him, and we were sort of emailing a bit back and forth, so I kind of got an unofficial blessing and was able to move forward with it. And since then, we've been in a bit of correspondence over the years, and I guess he makes himself very available to his fans and almost turns that into an artwork with his blog and other things. So he's been sort of a figure that kind of flits in and out. And I definitely, though I haven't had a chance to see a feature was made recently, I haven't had a chance to see it yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing it.
More importantly, what are you dressing up for Halloween as?
Yeah, well, it's kind of tough because I'm here now, right? So
Right.
I'm looking forward to celebrating Halloween in a different city. But the costume is kind of inspired by is kind of my brother's idea. We're going to do a trio of Charles Manson's girls.
Oh, okay, cool. Cool. Is there any other questions? All right, well, thank you. Okay.
I love the Canadianness, especially the Frozen Road. It feels so Canadian, and Joseph Boyden was saying in an article in the Globe and Mail, I think last week, how Canada's a haunted house, referring to residential schools, of course, but
Yes.
And ongoing genocide of First Nations people. And I'm wondering if have you guys seen Rhymes for Young Fools?
I haven't had a chance to see it yet.
It's amazing. Really good if we're speaking about like new voices in Canadian horror. Really good. It's a story of a young kid, Mi'kmaq kid, going to residential school, and it's a horror. It's really.
I'll have to check it out. No, I remember when it was at TIFF, I think,
Yeah.
last year or the year before. Yeah, I wanted to catch it.
Yeah. Anyway, I really appreciate the Canadian touch.
Thank you.
Ice cold touch. Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. And check out the art. Mark's going to be around if you want to have any other questions. And thank you.
Thanks again. Thank you.
Yes.